but the devil in malevolent as I've ever been. Head is spinning.
Venom, Let There Be Carnage is the exact type of movie I wanted to see when I was 8 years old. And I mean that in the best possible way. Andy Serkis's bonkers, balls-to-the-wall sequel released just this October after being delayed, undelayed, delayed again. But now it's out, and it's exactly what I expected and wanted from it. This is exactly what a movie about Venom would be. At least, the Venom from the PS1 game, or the 90s cartoon, or any of his comic appearances after he stopped being a full-on villain.
Tell me this, Einstein. Who could have wanted to steal Octavius' technology?
Ooh, we know!
Who?
The Submariner.
Submariner? Get serious, will you?
The mighty Thor.
Are you out of your mind? Don't answer that.
Galactus.
Forget it, Eddie.
That version of Venom is a wonderful combination of silly and edgy, and I can't believe we live in a world where we get to see that on the big screen instead of, like, the more contemporary Venom that's not played for laughs. From the various references and nods to old comic runs to the overall tone and style, this movie is full of stuff that really made me smile as someone who grew up on old back issues of the 90s Venom as some of the first comics I ever read. In short, Let There Be Carnage is a loving tribute to 90s comic book edgy trash. Now obviously this review is going to be kind of spoiler heavy, so all throughout the movie I saw things I never would have thought they'd pull from the comics in a million years, but I guess the writers did their research and were huge fans of 90s Venom stories. I feel like I'm not seeing anyone really appreciate just how much of a love letter this is to those books. So let's go over all the random odds and ends from the classic Venom stories that ended up incorporated into Venom Let Them Eat Cake. The plot is a combination of The Hunger, Maximum Carnage, Carnage Unleashed, and that other storyline also called The Hunger, which is a little confusing. With Eddie and the symbiote at odds about the aliens' hunger for human brains and wanton destruction, causing the suit to leave Eddie and run around draining the life out of various hosts and being a menace, while Eddie's institutionalized for his crimes as Venom. Cletus Cassidy's backstory is pulled right from the pages of the books, with his slaying of his grandma and his abusive childhood, his time in St. Estes Home for Boys when he was a troubled orphan, which he burned down as a kid. It's here where he would first encounter Spider-Man and demolish an innocent teddy bear, which is assuredly one of his most horrific crimes of all. Except in the movie, they have Carnage burn down St. Estes as an adult for the cathartic feeling of revenge now that he's got his powers and is painting the town appropriately red. We also have Carnage breaking out of Cletus Cassidy's body when he's strapped to a table and injected.
Enjoy the show!
In the comics, it was a tranquilizer when he was going to Ravencroft at the beginning of Maximum Carnage, but here it's a lethal injection. Viewers can later see the reference that shocked me the most, which is that Carnage's symbiote can interact with the internet. Ironically, this made more sense in the comics because he was just sending thin tendrils through the phone lines to attack people with shitty 90s dial-up internet. I have no idea how the hell this works in modern day, but the fact that they included it at all made me laugh out loud in the theater. Patrick Mulligan was Toxin in the comics and served as the goofy symbiote character after Venom comics got more serious in the early 2000s, with a similar straight man comedian and good cop bad cop vibe as Eddie in his suit the decade prior. He makes it into the movie as a cop that attempts to stop Carnage, but is infected with his spawn in the hectic fight, setting him up as a potential antagonist in the third movie. I always dug how Toxin could transition from a Spider-Man-like form to a monstrous design that looked more reminiscent of Venom and Carnage. I enjoyed his small miniseries from the 2000s, and I'm still really salty that he was just killed off panel by Blackheart from Ghost Rider to set up some crazy event for Flash Thompson Venom. Ever since, they haven't really known what to do with Toxin between all these hosts and being killed off like 3 times, so maybe Venom 3 can point them in the right direction and maybe give the general public more of an interest in Mulligan's character again, so Marvel can either revive him or at least give that character a proper death and send-off. After the big explosive climax, Venom separates Cletus and Carnage and then eats the symbiote in front of Cletus as he's horrified and powerless. And that's taken directly from Peter Parker's Spider-Man from the year 2000, right as the 90s era of silly symbiote shenanigans started to end. Oddly enough, though, Cletus found another symbiote in the negative zone, then just turned that into Carnage with the remnants of the original suit in his body, I guess. And then also Spider-Man was there in a new costume from the Spider-Man Unlimited cartoon, and then they fight an evil warlord from the negative zone named Blastar, and yeah, sometimes you don't need to be that accurate to the comic books because that's really convoluted and dumb. So instead, Venom just eats Cletus's head, and that's it. It's unfortunate that the reign of Carnage had to end so quickly, but there's about 4,000 storylines where Venom was about to kill him, and then that pansy-ass, bleeding-heart liberal Spider-Man is like, no, we can rehabilitate him, bro! But with no Spider-Man yet, and there's no one to say no, it makes sense for the characters, honestly. We end with Eddie and the symbiote hiding as fugitives from the law on an island, which he did for a while after being falsely led to believe he killed Spider-Man in the books. But due to Peter Parker in the MCU being a blithering buffoon that's always slipping on banana peels and wetting his pants, Venom and Eddie have been transported into the MCU. Whether that's a permanent change or not, I have no idea. Does that mean Venom is in No Way Home? Is that him way in the background instead of Lizard? I have no idea. Is he the invisible one that kicks Lizard right in the chops? Probably not. That'll be like Andrew. Will Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man tell Tom Holland's Spider-Man that he almost had his face ripped off once by a journalist named Eddie Brock bonded with a sludge monster from space, resulting in Tom Holland's Spider-Man seeing this guy and immediately trying to punch him in the dick?
A reporter named Eddie Brock tried to kill me. He turned into a monster after bonding with a symbiote. They almost bit my face off. Symbiotes are really dangerous. Stay away from those things. I'd recommend preventing that from happening on your world.
That'd be kind of forced, but hell, why not? Venom does mention that the symbiote hive mind can see across universes.
80 billion light years of hive knowledge across universes would explode your tiny little brain.
So maybe he saw his and Eddie's variants getting killed by a Spider-Man that resulted in immediate hatred and set up their rivalry. If I were a betting man, I'd say the plan is to have Venom 3 be Spider-Man vs. Venom in the first half, then Eddie loses the suit halfway through and is taken prisoner by some outside force, causing Venom and Spidey to bond together to go bust him out, giving Venom his trademark creepy spider logo and a demented version of Peter's powers. Pretty much the plot of that Spider-Man Unlimited episode. I'm the only one who remembers that show exists. For a while, I wasn't really set on the casting for Venom and Carnage. In my mind, for the last few years, they always should have been played by Dominic Purcell and Walton Goggins. But Tom Hardy and Woody Harrelson both really won me over in this one. After about 20 minutes of the movie, I stopped seeing Woody Harrelson and started just really seeing Cletus Cassidy. And that's an awesome feeling as someone that adored these characters as a kid. What I love about Venom Let There Be Carnage is that it knows exactly the type of movie it wants to be and achieves that marvelously in my book. It doesn't want to be your typical MCU movie where the characters stop, point at the comic book silliness, and then say, "Wow, isn't that dumb?" directly to the audience in hopes that the audience will play along. Instead of lampshading the absurdity of its source material, it embraces it with open arms. I don't love it solely because it's a list of references and recreated scenes from comics, because that can be hollow and boring if done improperly. What makes these moments and the whole movie shine for me is that it understands the tone and feeling of those moments too, and recreates them lovingly with what feels like a solid understanding of why those books are flawed, but also incredibly fun and charming. Edgy 90s comics from Marvel and DC had such a specific, unique feel to them, with storylines that were ultimately guided mostly towards the biggest and craziest bad guy you could fight, and propping up a hero that would have been considered a villain 10 years earlier. Venom books weren't high art in this time period. They were wacky and stupid and funny and full of jokes and allusions to extreme violence that they couldn't actually show on panel. This PG-13 film, either by design or pure coincidence after being censored from an R rating, has captured that exact feeling of lovable trashiness that wants to seem really violent and gory, but is still safe for kids. What the fuck are you doing back there?
No, nothing.
Why are you playing with a fidget spinner while I'm recording, Anna? I love you. It feels like it was made by people who truly love the character. I'm fully aware this movie isn't very smartly written. Its pacing is on fast forward, and a lot of it comes across as childish or dumb, but I feel like that's exactly what it was going for. Edgy 90s Venom comics weren't exactly pushing any boundaries or telling any stories that really redefined the medium. They just wanted to have fun with the toothy grin of its psychotic main character and frolic in the land of comic book weirdness that was inadvertently created in the 80s. And in that regard, MCU, I guess, Venom is a love letter to those books and that incredibly specific vibe of frantic comic chaos.
I love this show. When do you think the review will come out, Eddie?